than these top parts here. And now you can do weight painting and everything. Everything like that, but it's really overkill, and it doesn't really solve the problem, because then you end up with something that doesn't even have proper wrinkles and blah 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 blah. Anyways, the solution that I've figured out is that blah blah blah. Anyways, the solution that I've figured out is that you really only need one frame. To work, right? And towards the front, in the first few frames, it starts to look like the reference. All right, there we go. Loaded it into PureRef, so I don't have to deal with the website. But it, the reference is, it's got a little bit of push to it. It's a little bit, what's the shape? Not a bean bag. It's a little bit stuffy. But the actual shape itself of the rectangular sort of soft edged thing, it's retaining that, but it has some wrinkles down there. So really, we just need to find a frame at the front here that works. And currently it looks okay, but there's not nearly enough wrinkles. So the detail of your cushion is really determined by, there's a few values in here that really the biggest one is bending. That can have some sort of impact, but the biggest one of all is just how much geometry you actually have, right? So this is with this amount of geometry, and then when we increase this, by the way, it bases it off of the viewport amount, not the render amount, just for the cloth sim. Anyways, when you do this, you can see it takes a lot longer to simulate, but you get much more wrinkles. And this is actually an interesting point. You would think then that, like, if you just keep increasing that you would end up with a more and more realistic looking cloth simulator, right? But that's not necessarily true, because along with increasing the detail, you're also kind of changing the real world size, right? Like when I simulate at this is too high for the size of this cushion. And the amount of wrinkles that we'll get in this, if I can keep yabbering on whilst it generates, the amount of wrinkles that we'll get on this doesn't make sense for the size of this cushion. It would probably make sense for, like, basically, if you go too high on the subsurf, you can end up with a cushion that looks like the real world size would be like the size of a house or a building, right? So yeah, there's going to be more and more detail the larger something is, because cloth can only have so many wrinkles logically depending on the size of it, if that makes sense, right? So too many wrinkles here. It's not terrible, but it's probably too many wrinkles for the size of this couch. So don't automatically think like, yeah, I'm just gonna let it simulate overnight and then I'll have a hyper real cushion. Like, you don't need to, thankfully. You can just go for something moderate like this, look at the amount of wrinkles that you get, compare it to your reference, and go like, yeah, is that more or less than what I want? And this is definitely fine. Okay, so, we could pause it here, like we could, freeze it, say this is the frame I want to use, but we can also tweak it a little bit more. So this pressure amount here, I realized pretty late, actually, just yesterday, that the amount of wrinkles that you get here is also determined by how fast it is expanding. Okay, so if you were to set this to 50, what you would find, we do have to wait for it to sort of go, is that you end up with less wrinkles, right? So you can see that like at this point, that's way too deformed for us to use it, and the amount of wrinkles we've gotten is really small, right? So you can see like, this is maybe even this is probably the size of the cushion that we want in terms of deformation, but there's hardly any wrinkles appearing there. Whereas if you went for a lower amount, so 5, 1/10 of what it was just now, is it will fill it up slower, and you can see it gives it time for wrinkles to appear. So then it like clicked to me. I'm like, aha, that's the key figure then, is like if you want to control for the shape of this, as well as controlling how many wrinkles you get, you need to adjust this pressure amount to fill it up slower or faster, depending on if you want more wrinkles. So if you want more wrinkles, then you would slow it down so that it would fill up slower, right? You end up with more frames before it gets to the size that it needs to, and therefore you end up with more wrinkles. If you've got too many wrinkles, then you increase the pressure size. So you can see like now I've got like this big bend here, and it sort of looks like it's like a loose sort of cushion. So it's like a totally different effect, and yet it's all controlled by this pressure amount here, right? So that's what I mean. Like the pressure is really like the biggest factor here in making a couch cushion. Again, we just need one frame for it to look right. So, thankfully it's at the start of the animation, so you don't have to wait forever for it to sort of come around to the right shape. That looks pretty good to me. Now you could, if you wanted to, by the way, change your bending amount. So I'll just very quickly show you what that is. Depending on the couch you're doing, you might want to adjust this. If we set that to 20, so instead of basically 40 times its default, you'll see you get far less wrinkles, and the wrinkles that you do get is bigger and chunkier. And as well as that, it also retains this edge, right? And that's because, it's bending less, so that 90-degree angle that it starts with, it's trying to retain that and keep it sharp. Now, if you do that, though...
This is Kayla. She's a video editor.
If you want that, you don't necessarily have to change this, because along with this, you end up with less wrinkles, right? So it's more suited for something like leather, and it's like, maybe if I want fabric, but I do want there to be an edge. When we get to the cloth sculpting stage next, using the cloth brush, I'll show you a way that we're gonna do some detail around the seams, so you don't necessarily need that. Anyways, let's, don't want this tutorial to be like hours long, so let's set that to 0.5. This is what I'm gonna go with. Let's see how this comes out. All right, that is pretty good. By the way, if you go shade smooth, it can kind of give you a little bit of a look at how it's going to look. With proper shading. Okay, so how big do you want it? How big do you want it? How puffy do you want it looking from the side? Okay, comparing it with the reference. Does that make sense for the type of couch that we're going for? And I think it does. I think that's fine. So when you apply this, you can't go back. Well, you can if you've just done it. You can probably have enough undos to undo the operation. But if you were to get sculpting later on and then go, oh, actually, I need to.
Mine is terrible. We're just waiting for this to go to 25 or 30. And I can't skip a beat. So sorry for the wait. Stop right here. Alright.
It would be good if I could recalculate that cloth sim. It's gone. So what I like to do before I apply anything, don't worry about that. That's my watch, just interrupting tutorial. I duplicate it, Shift D, and then I just move it to the side, like so. And then this, I hit M and then move it to a new collection, which I call unapplied, and then it's moved it to its own collection, and then I just uncheck that box, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's hidden, and if I need it, it's there. I can go back to it and recalculate it. Now that I've done that, I hit apply and then apply again. On the cloth sim. And that is it. We now have okay, stop. Go back. Control Z, because we've just done it. There is one more thing, and I'm glad I noticed it. Before you apply it, later on, we are going to be UV unwrapping this guy because we want to apply a texture to it, right? Fabric texture. It is a lot easier to UV unwrap something when you have started with a base mesh like this than it is later on, because it's then going to try and figure out the shape of it and do all this weird stuff. It's a pain. So it's a good idea to UV unwrap it before you apply it. So, okay. We just need to add some UV seams in here, and thankfully this is a couch object where there is logically real seams in real life, so it's very easy to UV unwrap. All we're going to do is go select sharp edges, and that will select all the edges. Oh, and this is in edge select mode, by the way. So hit if you do it in vertice mode, that's wrong. You want to go edge select mode, select sharp edges, then go Control E, and then click mark seam. And that is it. Then we go to the UV image editing tab.
Wow, finally.
Tab up here, and then hit U, unwrap. Okay, and if you see a little alert down there that says like, oh, something's non-uniform, that's because the scale of this down there, select sharp edges, then go Control E, and then click mark seam. And that is it. Then we go to the UV image editing tab up here, and then hit U, unwrap. Okay, and if you see a little alert down there that says like, oh, something's non-uniform, that's because the scale of this is not set to 1.
What did he do?
Non-uniform, that's because the scale of this
God. I was gonna cuss, but I watched myself. Gosh dang it.
is not set to 1. So make sure, I mean, it's the cause of half the problems you have in Blender is when the object has a scale that's not 1, 1, 1. So hit Control A, apply your scale.
Oh man.
Set to 1. So make sure, I mean,
He hit shift left. Uh-oh. But not like that.
the cause of half the problems you have in Blender is when the object has, so make sure, I mean, it's the cause of half the problems you have in is not set to 1. So make sure, I mean, it's
Why am I so stupid?
the scale of this alert down there is not set to 1. So make sure, I mean, it's the cause of half the problems you have in Blender is when the object has a scale that's not 1, 1, 1. So hit Control A, apply.
But why is it showing so different?
Is not
746129. No.
not set to 1. So make sure
Usually,
scale of
I'm gonna look into the dimension part. 0129 and then 529. I realized my blender had a bad accident. They don't match, but they are quite close, except for the Y. I want to see if this matches.
this is not set to 1. So make sure, I mean, it's the cause of half the problems you have in Blender is when the object has a scale that's not 1, 1, 1. So hit Control A, apply your scale, then hit U, unwrap again, and it should then correctly UV unwrap. Okay, now that we've done that, U unwrap again.
Here we are. Maybe a bit
Again, and it should then correctly UV unwrap. Okay, now that we've done that, we can apply it, but of course, we have to recalculate the simulation because we've just done some editing. I don't know how Blender decides it. But anyways, thankfully, it doesn't take that long. And that's pretty good. Good. So now we hit apply.
Yep, we hit apply.
And apply. And now we have our object here. Ta-da! It's UV unwrapped, it's ready to go, and it looks pretty good. And if you want to see it, like, yeah, add another subsurf modifier after it, and you'll like smooth out those shapes, because that's what we're going to do when we render it anyway. And you can see sort of how it looks. It's not too bad, right? It's got the right like smooth deformations. It's got wrinkles where there should logically be wrinkles, and overall it looks pretty nice, but doesn't look that detailed, and that's what the next part is for. So in the next part, we're going to be jumping into sculpt mode and use the new cloth brush. Thank you, Apple Watch.